Not because life was easy, but because it felt normal. Most people who grew up poor in the 1970s didn't know it at the time. We didn't measure childhood by what we owned. We measured it by the small, everyday things we all shared, the habits, the workarounds, the ways families quietly made things last. Pliers on the TV, patched jeans, day-old bread, hand-me-down shoes, and summers that never went very far. Looking back now, those moments stand out as clear signs of how we grew up. In many homes, things didn't get replaced just because they broke. They got figured out. A TV losing its channel knob wasn't a crisis. It was an inconvenience. Someone would grab a pair of pliers, set them carefully on top of the set, and that became the new remote control. Turning the channel was a slow, delicate operation. Too fast, and the picture vanished. Too far, and the sound disappeared. Everyone learned the touch. The idea of throwing something away just because it was damaged didn't make sense. If it still worked, even a little, it still had value. This wasn't about being stubborn or cheap. It was about respect. Respect for the money that bought the thing and the effort it took to earn it. Fixing, adapting, and making do weren't special skills. They were everyday habits. And looking back, they taught an entire generation that usefulness mattered more than appearance, and that nothing was truly broken until it absolutely couldn't be used anymore. Meals in the 1970s weren't about variety. They were about reliability. Bologna, sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, fried bologna on white bread. These weren't fallback options. They were staples. Dinner before payday might be pancakes or French toast, and no one acted like that was a problem. It was just how the week worked. Government cheese made its way into countless kitchens, melted into macaroni, or sliced thick for sandwiches. It wasn't gourmet, but it filled plates and kept everyone fed. And that mattered more than taste. Kids didn't ask what was for dinner in the way they do now. They ate what was made. Complaining didn't change the menu, and hunger wasn't something most families let linger. Looking back, those meals weren't signs of lack. They were signs of stability. Simple food, eaten together, day after day, fuel for growing bodies and quiet proof that even when money was tight, no one was going to bed hungry. Buying bread from the day-old shelf wasn't embarrassing, it was practical. The loaves were a little firmer, maybe not as soft as the fresh ones, but they worked just fine for toast or sandwiches. If a name brand showed up with a discount sticker, that felt like a small win. Some families even had entire stores dedicated to this way of shopping, scratch and dent markets where dented cans and imperfect boxes came at lower prices. Nothing was wrong with the food. It just wasn't pretty. No one talked about saving the environment or reducing waste. Those words came later. This was about stretching a dollar and making sure groceries lasted until the next paycheck. It taught a quiet lesson. Value isn't about perfection. It's about usefulness. And sometimes the smartest choices are the ones that don't look impressive at all. Clothes didn't retire after a single season. They lived many lives. Jeans with worn knees weren't thrown away. They were patched. Iron-on patches, hand-sewn squares, whatever fabric was available. Function came first. Appearance came second. Hand-me-downs were a normal part of growing up. Clothes passed from cousins to siblings, from older brothers to younger sisters. By the time some items reached their final owner, the fabric was thin and the colors faded, but they were still worn proudly because they still did their job. There was no concept of distressed fashion. Rips weren't style choices. They were problems to be solved. Today, people pay extra for jeans designed to look worn out, and that irony isn't lost on those who remember patching their own. Back then, the goal wasn't to look a certain way. It was to make things last. And in doing so, kids learned that worth wasn't tied to newness. It was tied to care, effort, and making the most of what you already had. Most kids didn't have a closet full of shoes. they had two pairs. One pair was for school, church, or special occasions. That pair stayed clean, carefully placed by the door, and worn only when absolutely necessary. The other pair was for everything else, running around outside, riding bikes, scraping along sidewalks, and getting muddy without much thought. The good pair had a job to do. It had to last. Sometimes an entire school year, sometimes longer. When it started to show wear, it didn't get replaced right away. It got rotated. You learned to walk differently in your good shoes. You paid attention. You didn't drag your feet. Shoes weren't fashion statements. They were investments. And for a lot of families, two pairs were plenty, as long as you took care of them and understood which ones mattered most. Older cars had personalities, and not all of them were reliable. When the engine wouldn't turn over, nobody panicked. Someone popped the hood. Someone else got behind the wheel, and a few people lined up behind the car to push. Once it was rolling, the driver popped the clutch and hoped the engine caught. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it took a few tries. Either way, help was expected, not requested. Neighbors didn't stay inside. Kids joined in. It was just part of living with a car that had seen better days. Taking it to a mechanic wasn't always an option. Repairs cost money, and money had to be saved for more important things. So families did what they could, when they could. A car that needed a push wasn't a symbol of failure. It was simply transportation that still had some life left in it. Cold winters revealed every weakness in a pair of boots. If your shoes leaked or had thin soles, there was a simple fix. You took an empty bread bag, slipped it over your sock, and pulled your boot on over it. Sometimes the bag went outside the boot instead. Either way, it kept your feet dry. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't stylish, but it worked. Rubber bands held the bags in place, pant legs tucked in as best they could. You didn't complain, because the alternative was wet socks and frozen toes. No one thought of it as clever. It was just another solution passed quietly from one family to another. Years later, people look back and laugh. But at the time, those bread bags were proof that you didn't need new things, just workable ideas. Many kids didn't wait until adulthood to understand money. They learned early. Empty bottles were collected for deposit refunds. Newspapers were delivered before school. Babysitting, mowing lawns, and helping neighbors brought in a few dollars at a time. In some families, kids helped maintain gardens that provided food for the entire household. Vegetables weren't hobbies, they were necessities, and everyone had a role to play. That money wasn't always for toys. Sometimes it went towards school supplies or clothes. Sometimes it helped cover small household expenses. Work wasn't framed as a burden. It was just part of belonging to a family. You contributed because you could, not because anyone forced you to. Those experiences didn't make childhood harder, they made it clearer. Kids learned the difference between needs, and once long before they had words for it. And that understanding stayed with them long after the money finally showed up later in life. For many families, vacations didn't involve airplanes or hotels. They involved packing the car and driving to see relatives. A few days on a couch or a spare bed, familiar streets in unfamiliar towns. When school started again and teachers asked about summer vacation, kids talked about playing outside, going to the local pool, or visiting cousins. It never felt like anything was missing. You just assumed everyone's summer looked the same. Trips weren't about escape. They were about connection. Years later, some people realized other families went to beaches or theme parks. But that realization came slowly, and it didn't erase the memories that mattered. Those summers were full in their own way, long days, simple fun, and the quiet understanding that being together was the point. And for a long time, that was more than enough. When the school book fair flyer came home, it was studied carefully. Kids circled titles with pencils, imagining which ones they might get. Most of the time, those circles stayed on paper. There wasn't money for books, and everyone quietly understood that. Still, the book fair mattered. Walking through the tables, flipping pages, reading the backs of covers, it felt like a small window into another world. Sometimes a parent sent you with $1 or $2. Maybe you bought a thin paperback. Maybe just a bookmark. Even if you didn't buy anything, no one felt left out. The excitement was in the choosing, not the owning. Those moments taught kids that wanting something didn't mean you had to have it right away, and that imagination didn't cost a thing. If you showed up at school without lunch money or a packed meal, there was a system. You were handed a plain peanut butter sandwich. Sometimes it came with a carton of milk. Sometimes it didn't. No questions were asked, and no explanations were required. It wasn't announced. It wasn't pointed out. You took the sandwich, sat down, and ate quietly. There was no sense of shame built into it, just practicality. The school made sure you weren't hungry, and that was enough. Kids didn't complain about how dry it was or how plain it tasted. They ate and went on with their day. Looking back, it was a small thing, but it showed a quiet kind of dignity. Help was offered without making anyone feel smaller for needing it. Many homes were crowded, but not in a way that felt empty. Grandparents moved in. Aunts and uncles stayed for long stretches. Sometimes it was illness. Sometimes it was money. Sometimes there was simply nowhere else to go. Holidays brought even more people. Card tables appeared in living rooms. Extra chairs were borrowed from neighbors. Plates didn't match, and nobody cared. Meals were planned months in advance. Parents budgeted carefully to make sure there was enough food for everyone, and somehow there always was. Those gatherings weren't quiet. They were loud, busy, and full of conversation. Kids squeezed between adults. Stories were told and retold. Laughter carried from room to room. Years later, many people realized they've never experienced anything quite like it again. The houses weren't big, but the tables were long, and everyone belonged. What stands out now isn't what was missing, it's how much was shared. For a long time, nothing felt unusual. It was only after growing up, moving out, and starting families of their own that many people looked back and recognized what had really been happening. The repairs, the substitutions, the careful decisions made every day. What once felt normal suddenly looked like sacrifice. But with that realization came something else, gratitude, not for the lack of money, but for the stability, the effort, and the care that held everything together. Those childhoods weren't defined by what was missing. They were shaped by resilience, cooperation, and a shared understanding that everyone was doing their best. You don't miss the struggle itself. You miss the closeness it created. And when people say they wouldn't trade growing up that way for anything, this is what they mean. Not nostalgia for being poor, but appreciation for a time when life felt simpler, steadier, and quietly enough. Looking back, it's easy to label those years as poor. But that word doesn't quite fit. What we really grew up with was limitation, and within it, a quiet kind of richness. Homes filled with people instead of things. Meals that were simple but dependable. Parents who stretched every dollar without ever making their kids feel small for it. We didn't know what we were missing because we didn't feel like we were missing anything. Childhood wasn't measured by upgrades or brand names. It was measured by full tables, worn shoes that still worked, and the understanding that everyone was doing their part. That way of growing up didn't make life easier, but it made it clearer. It taught an entire generation how to tell the difference between needs and wants, how to take care of what they had, and how to find comfort in people instead of possessions. Today, many of those lessons feel almost out of place. The world moves faster. Things are replaced instead of repaired. And enough is a harder line to draw. But for those who lived it, the memory remains, not as a longing to go back, but as a grounding reminder of what truly mattered. We didn't grow up with less. We grew up learning how to live with what we had, and for many of us, that turned out to be more than enough.